Hey guys, welcome to this live session by Intellipaat. So in this session, we're going to look into Azure Security. So we'll start off with the introduction to Azure Security, and also we'll look into concepts in Azure Security, as well as we'll learn about the AZ-500 exam, which is basically the Azure Security examination. So now before moving on with this session, please subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss our upcoming videos, and also leave a like if you enjoy our content. Now let's take a quick glance at the agenda. So we'll start off with the introduction to the AZ500 or the Azure Security examination, and we'll learn what do they expect from the candidate and how to pass that particular examination. Once that is done, we'll move on to the introduction to Azure Security. After that, we'll learn concepts like identity protection and application registration. Then we'll look into Azure AD privileged identity management. Then we'll look into access reviews. Moving on, we'll be looking into Azure AD Connect, and finally we'll learn about Azure ownership transfer. And that would be the last part of this particular session. So now without any further delays, let's start with it. So let's start off with the introduction to AZ500. So candidates for this exam should have subject matter expertise implementing security controls and threat protection, managing identity and access, and protecting data, applications, and network. So basically, the candidates who are going to write this exam should have expertise or should have knowledge in implementing security controls and threat protection and manage identity and access in Azure, and also using this you should be able to protect the data, the applications, and the networks which are available on Azure. So the main target is to make the candidate know about Azure Security, and the candidate should be able to manage and also troubleshoot any security issues in the Azure cloud. So now basically get the certification, you should clear the AZ500 examination, which is Microsoft Azure Security Technologies. And once that is done, you will be given the Azure Security Engineer Associate Microsoft Certified badge. So this is the basic about the AZ500 examination. So now let's look at the skills measured. The first one is manage identity and access, and then implement platform protection, then manage security operations, and finally secure data and applications. So the most popular or the most asked questions would be from the first module, that is manage identity and access. So you can see over there in the right side of the point, there is a percentage written, that is 30 to 35%. So let's say there are 100 questions. So there would be so if there are 100 questions, 30 of those questions or 35 of those questions would be from the first module, which is manage identity and access. And then implement platform protection, that is 15 to 20%, manage security operations 25 to 30%, secure data and applications 20 to 25%. So this is how the questions will be segregated in the examination. And so this is basically a rough calculation. And this is basically not given by me. This is officially given by Microsoft. You can check it out in the official guide as well. Also, the examination cost will vary. So according to the country, you guys would have already looked into this. Only then you would have taken up this certification or taken up this course, obviously. But I just wanted to give you a brief about that. So whichever country you are from, you can just go to the official page. You can just click on the country and it will show you the price of the examination in your country. So now, introduction to Azure Security. So first of all, let's look at cloud security, because before moving on to Azure Security, you should basically know why do we need cloud security, because Azure Security is also a form of cloud security, but we are basically doing security measures on the Azure cloud, and that's the only difference. So every company uses cloud in one or another way. And this makes cloud security very significant. If every single IT company is using cloud, obviously the data in the cloud and the applications which the company hosts in the cloud should be safe and secure. So because of that, most companies who are basically moving from the on-premise setup to the cloud are worried about security. So now, maintaining strong cloud security allows the company to leverage other cloud benefits. If the company is using cloud, and if they have basically made security let's say a priority and everything is done, so your applications, data, everything is secure and good enough, you're doing routine checkups every single day to check if there are any loopholes or vulnerabilities, so everything is going well and good. In that case, you can basically get other benefits out of cloud. So the main benefit you're going to get out of cloud is a reduction in your operational cost. the company will have a reduction in the operation cost, because there is no upfront in cloud. Like your on-premise, you don't have to buy hardware and set it up. You can just start using cloud and then pay it, or you can just take up let's say like a 1 year or a 3 year period. So that will also reduce your operational cost, and also it will basically give you scalability. In an on-premise setup, scalability is very less, but in cloud, scalability is very high. So now basically making sure your cloud security is strong will help you reduce administrative and operational costs, as well as give you the benefits of scalability, and also it has lower upfront costs. So now looking at this, now let's look at why do we need Azure Security. Now, one of the best reasons to use Azure for your applications and services is to take advantage of its wide array of security tools and capabilities. So first of all, there are many cloud providers. So you guys have chosen Azure to be your cloud provider, or if your company is using Azure, obviously you'll have to learn Azure to aid your company. So in this case, Azure obviously provides a lot of applications and services which you can use, and basically to take advantage of those services, they also provide security tools and other capabilities. So now these Azure tools and capabilities help make it possible to create secure solutions on the Secure Azure platform. Azure provides confidentiality, integrity, and availability of customer data, while also enabling transparent accountability. So basically what they are telling is that they are giving you the services which are obviously virtual machines, and all those services is provided to you. At the same time, they are providing you confidentiality with your data, and also integrity with your data, that is nothing will be lost, and also availability, that is you can access it anywhere from any time at any time you want, and also enabling transparent accountability. So it can be, if there is any problem with caused by Azure, that will be, you can basically directly talk with them. But the thing is, there won't be any problem, and that's what is provided by Azure. So that's basically it. Azure provides confidentiality, integrity, and availability of customer data, applications, everything, while providing transparent accountability. Okay? So this is basically why Azure Security. If you're basically going with other cloud providers, you should also learn their security tools. If you're going to get into development or solutions architecture or even security, security is important for every single cloud role, because when you develop applications and want to basically create an architecture in the cloud to host your application, in that case you should basically consider what are the security measures you'll have to take up before doing that. So now let's look at the shared responsibility model, because this is how every single cloud provider works. So in Azure, again, there is a shared responsibility model where some of the responsibility is retained by the customer and some of the responsibility is always retained by the cloud provider. Okay, so now first let's look at the main things which are always retained by the customer, and some things which are always retained by Microsoft. So now you can see over here the blue parts are customer and the gray parts are Microsoft. Now coming to customers, so the information and data, that is your information, your data, whatever is on the cloud, it will basically be your responsibility. Okay, so let's say you're keeping your data in blob storage, and now you'll have to make sure that particular storage account is secure enough so that nobody else has access. Let's say there are multiple users, you will have to check whether the users have access to this particular storage blob bucket, and if they do, then you'll have to basically check if they should have access or not. If they should not have access, you should basically remove them. So basically the data, the devices which you connect, your accounts, your identities, the user accounts, everything is the customer's responsibility. The customer should be careful with it. So now looking at on-premise, so you can see there are three different services over here: software as a service, platform as a service, and infrastructure as a service, and finally there is on-premises as well. So in this case, if you have an on-premise setup instead of a cloud setup, in that case everything is the customer's responsibility, because it is your setup and everything is yours. So the physical, even the hardware is going to be yours, so everything is customer's responsibility. If it is infrastructure as a service, in that case Microsoft Azure basically provides you with the physical hosts, the network, and the data center where you can launch your virtual machines, your storage accounts, and everything. So in that case, those things are managed by the cloud provider, that is Azure. So if it is a software as a service application, if it is a software as a service application or platform as a service or infrastructure as a service, doesn't matter. If it is on the cloud and not on-premise, it will be managed by the cloud provider, which is Microsoft Azure. And then if it is infrastructure as a service, in that case, you can select the operating system. The customer can have the network control. The customer can have control over the applications hosted on it, and also the identity and directory infrastructure will be given to basically customer. Okay, but in the platform as a service case, where you just put in your code and Azure basically takes the code and hosts the website for you, in that case the operating system is managed by, or the operating system responsibility is given to Azure. And network controls, applications and identity and directory infrastructure is basically a joint between the customer and the cloud provider. If it is in default setting, it will be handled by Microsoft. If you want to make some changes, then it will be handled by the customer. And then finally, software as a service. So in software as a service, the cloud provider will just give you the software. You don't have access to anything else, but you might have some access to the identity and directory infrastructure, because if you set up your own identity infrastructure, that is, you want your users to basically log in into the software, in that case you will have some of the responsibility to manage it, but everything else, every other control will be given to the cloud provider. So this is basically the shared responsibility model. The responsibility is shared between both customer and the cloud provider, and it is so the cloud provider will basically take care of the security from their side. They won't let any unauthorized access into the data center, but in the same time the customer should also have, or basically put in best practices so that they can stop unauthorized access from their end. And then there is also the traditional and the cloud enabled security approach. So the thing is, in a traditional method, security is always challenging because you'll have to set up every single aspect and monitor everything. But when it is cloud enabled, some of the responsibility is given to the cloud provider. So now looking at the traditional approach, you can see over here, this is just an example: a satisfied responsibility, partially met, unmet, and cloud provider responsibility. So here it's a traditional approach. So the cloud provider does not have any responsibility. It is completely the companies or the customers' responsibility. So there are a lot of unmet responsibilities. There are some satisfied, some partially met. So basically it's pretty hard to check every single aspect every single day. There might be some problem to rectify, but again, to check every single aspect every single day is really tough when it's the traditional approach. Now coming to a cloud enabled security. So you can see over here, first, shift commodity responsibilities to provider and reallocate your resources. So commodity responsibilities in the sense, so the data center, the physical hardware, everything is managed by the cloud provider, so the cloud technology. So you don't need to worry about it. Everything will be managed for you. And also the updates, the security patches, everything will be handled. And then the rest is basically your responsibility. So in the you can basically meet a lot of responsibilities, and then again some cases there will be unmet responsibility as well, because again, even in a cloud enabled security, you cannot look into every single aspect. There might be something missing, you will have to figure it out. Then leverage cloud based security technologies for more effectiveness. So in this case you're not doing it, but when it's cloud enabled security, in some cases you can directly enable cloud security tools, cloud security services, which will automatically do the tasks which you want to do manually for you. And so basically use cloud intelligence to improve detection and response time. So there are some tools which basically checks your cloud architecture, checks your complete cloud resources, and gives you timely results, gives you timely updates on what lacks security and what does not, what is proper, so that you can check it and basically make sure everything is in proper order. So this is introduction to Azure Security. I think you understood a little bit of about Azure Security. So now let's start off with identity protection. So identity protection is a tool provided by Azure Active Directory. So this helps the organization to accomplish three important tasks. First one is automate the detection and remediation of identity-based risks. So basically it tells you and it gives you access, and it basically checks everything which are related to identity-based risks, that is user-based or group-based risks, and then investigates risks using the data which are already available in the Azure portal, and also export risk detection data to third-party utilities for further analysis. That is, once the risks basically is investigated, then you can also export or download this data for further usage. So now let's just take a quick look at some of the risks which would be identified by the identity protection tool. So the first one is anonymous IP address. So if you sign in from an anonymous IP address, for example, if you use Tor browser to log in into your Azure account, then that will be considered as a risky sign-in. Or if you use certain VPNs to log in, and if it is an anonymous IP address, in that case again, it would be a risky sign-in. It will be considered as a risky sign-in. You will still be able to sign in and use your account, but again it will be considered as a risky sign-in, and it will be available or it will be shown in the identity protection tool. And then malware linked IP address. So if you sign in from a malware linked IP address, again that will be taken and that will be shown. Password spray indicates that multiple usernames are being attacked using common passwords in a unified brute force manner. So it will check if multiple accounts are pretty much using the same type of password which is getting caught in a brute force attack. So if they are pretty simple alphanumeric or just alphabetic passwords, that will get caught under a brute force attack easily, and that's also checked. Then leaked credentials, if a user's valid credentials have been leaked, so this will be determined. So it doesn't, Microsoft don't say what exactly they do to get this, but for example you can consider it like this. So let's say you're using your account in the same PC with the same IP address for a long time. So now suddenly the account is opened in 4 different locations in 4 different PCs. That will be considered as leaked credentials, and that will also be shown in the identity protection tool. And also new country. So let's say if the activity comes from a country where none of your employees basically log in from ever. For example, let's say you're on a tour to, or if you're on a trip to some other country where you don't have any employees. So from that country, if you try to log in into your Azure portal, it might consider it as a risk because it's coming from a country which is basically not at all used. Do not use this particular Active Directory, and it comes from there, and it will be considered as a risk. So these are some of the detection types, risk detection types. There are so many others which you can check in the official portal. And then, so now administrator can review detections and take manual action on them if needed. So as an administrator or the main user account, the global administrator, you can basically check the risks, you can check the risky sign-ins, you can check the detections, and you can take actions. If you think some user is actually, like for example, their credentials are leaked, you can basically set up a policy where they'll have to reset their password. And also you can set up a password policy which basically needs them to set up a pretty difficult password which cannot be broken down or cracked in a brute force attack. And then identity protection categorizes risks into 3 main tiers. One is low, medium, and high. So this again, Microsoft does not give information on how it is segregated into these 3 parts, but you can consider it high as really risky, and so it's basically that's what it means in medium and low. And we can say that each level brings higher confidence that the user or sign-in is compromised. That is, if it is in high, that basically means it's pretty much compromised. Low means please check up, and medium, there is a chance of whether it's a risk or just it's the same user accessing from a different IP address or something like that. Okay, so now identity protection requires users be a security reader, security operator, security administrator, global reader, or a global administrator. So if you're a global administrator, you get full access to the identity protection tool. If you are a security administrator, you will not be able to reset password for a user, but if as a global administrator, you can do that. As a security operator, you can view all identity protection reports and overview blade, and dismiss user risk and confirm safe sign in and confirm compromise, but you cannot basically change policies or reset password or configure alerts. Now coming to security reader, so a security reader will be able to view all identity protection reports and view overview blade, but cannot do any actions in Azure Active Directory identity protection tool. But as a global reader, you will be able to see everything, but you don't have any permissions to do any actions. So these are the roles which will allow you to check out the identity protection tool. So now I'll just take you through the identity protection app. So the first thing in overview, you can see if there are any unprotected or protected or count. So you can basically check everything. You can also configure a sign-in risk policy as well. Okay guys, if you're looking for an end-to-end Azure security course, Intellipaat provides one, and those details are available in the description box below. Now let's continue with this session. So here you can see if there are any users who are newly detected as risky users, that will be shown over here. You can directly click on it and see over there. And over here, these are the three different types of reports you get. One is risky users, one is risky sign-ins, and risk detections. Risky users are users who are under risk if their credentials are compromised, or if their password is being leaked or something like that. So those are risky users. Risky sign-ins basically check whether they are coming from an infrequent country or from an anonymous IP address. Risk detections are common risk detections which takes place in identity management. So right now in my account, there are no risky users or risky sign-ins. I have certain users, but there are no risky sign-ins or risky users because they're just dummy users who basically log in from, I basically log in from the same PC. I'm not logged in from a Tor browser. I basically use Chrome. So if you want to simulate it, you can just open download Tor browser, which is basically this Tor browser. You can download it and you can use that to log in into a user, and that will show up in a risky sign-in or a risky user. So this is basically the identity protection app. You don't need to set up anything first. It's already set up, but again, you can go ahead and change some risk policies over here. So for example, you can, so the enforce policy is off right now. So we have enforced the user risk policy. Now if we click on it, if there are any users at risk, it will be shown over here. Same thing with sign-in. You can set up your policy accordingly and enforce the policy. You can set up a multi-factor authentication policy as well. So these are some of the things you can set up, and this is basically the identity protection app. There is nothing complex over here. So you can also set up to notify the users who are related to these risks which got detected. So you can basically put in the custom email over here. Let's say you want to notify your user, whoever is that. So you can basically add, and they'll get a mail whenever there is a new risk detected. Yeah, so these are the options. So the one is the policies, one is the reports, and one is the notification which you get through mail if you have set it up. Okay, so I think you understood identity protection. Let's go back to the PPT. We're going to look into application registration. So when you register an application in Azure Active Directory, it actually describes the application to Azure Active Directory and the permissions the application should have when it tries to access services across Azure. Basically, when you register it, it will describe the application, what the application needs, and what are the permissions it needs to basically access certain resources. So everything is basically provided to Azure AD, and the permissions which the application requires is also provided to Azure AD itself. So now once it's registered, everything will be provided. Now the application will use Microsoft's identity platform to authenticate. So now OAuth 2.2 authorization is implemented and helps. So that basically helps a third-party application to access web-hosted resources. So I'll basically explain why it would be a problem. So for example, if you have an application and are trying to access Azure resources, you obviously need to establish connection and establish authority and authentication. So only that you can basically access Azure resources. But to do this, instead you can register your application in Azure AD, and that is the easiest way to do it. So now there are two permissions which take place in Azure AD, especially for application registration. The first one is application needs delegated permissions. When there is a signed-in user, the application uses the delegated permissions to act on behalf of the signed-in user to make calls to a target resource. So delegated permissions is used only when there is a signed-in user, and the application basically uses these permissions to act on behalf of the signed-in user to make calls to a target resource, which can be any Azure service. So now the application will require this permission. Only with this permission, it can contact another Azure service on behalf of it. Okay, so this is basically delegated permissions. So in this case, a signed in user should be available. But there is also another thing, which is basically application permissions. So there needs to be processes and some background tasks which should be happening in the application, because whenever you try to do some action on the application, not everything will be happening in front of you, that is in the visible console. There is a backend where the background processes and the daemon processes will be running on. So now these do not need the signed in user. So these are basically permissions which are given to the application. So now these are called application permissions, and they are run without a signed in user. Basically background or daemon processes which run in the background without any need of human intervention. Okay, so these two are the permissions which are provided. So there are multiple permissions. For example, if you want your application to access the storage account, and then you'll only have to provide permission to do that. You don't need to provide permission for the application to access every single Azure resource. You just have to give permission for that one particular resource. So that's basically delegated permissions and application permissions. So now let me explain it to you with this example. So let's say you have an application and you want to basically get information from Azure SQL database, because Azure SQL database is the one connected to your application. So now to do that, you can do in the first way, which is basically embedding your credentials, the database's credentials in the application, which in fact will basically fetch the details and give it back to the application. And in this case, you don't need Azure Active Directory or anything else. Or you can store it in Azure Key Vault. Basically the credentials in Azure Key Vault, and it accesses the Azure Key Vault, and that in turn logs in, basically gives access, and you can basically get information from Azure SQL database again. But both of these ways are not secure enough, especially the first way, that is embedding your credentials in the application. So to solve this, you can use application registration, which I explained in the first slide. So what you will do is you register your application in Azure Active Directory. So now it's like a separate user. You're creating a separate user. Like that, you are creating a separate application or registering a separate application in Azure AD, and you provide all the permissions and needs which are basically required by the application, which I explained as delegated and application permissions. So now in this case, your application needs permission to access the SQL database. So to do that, you will have to provide the application permission in Azure Active Directory to access the SQL database. So now once you've given permission, so let's say now as a user, you're trying to retrieve some information. So now the application is already registered in Azure AD. So now the registration basically will authenticate itself. That is, your application is registered on an application called Azure Active Directory, which in turn will get you the resources or the information from the database. Basically, your application is authenticating itself. There is no in between. You're not providing any password or anything. There is no information which is going on, like providing over here, which makes it insecure. So it's completely secure. Your application automatically authenticates, and then which basically authenticates on another application, which is your Active Directory. And now Azure Active Directory checks if it has the permissions to do the task which it basically is asking to do, to retrieve information over here. So now it checks the subscription, whether this particular Azure account has access to get information or to basically use Azure SQL database. If it does have, it retrieves the information and it gives it back to the application. So this is basically application registration, access reviews. Azure AD access reviews enable organizations or administrators to efficiently manage group memberships, access to enterprise applications, and role assignments. Basically an access review in turn basically managing memberships, access to certain applications or certain role assignments. So now access provided to users can be constantly checked, and you should make sure only the right users have continued access. So the main purpose of access reviews, to put it simply, let's say you have 50 users in your account and only 10 of those users are developers, and only those 10 should have access to certain Azure resources and should have a certain role assigned to them. So now you do an access review on all those 50 users to check who are the users who have this particular assignment to them. So let's say it's a password administrator. So 10 users should have the password administrator assignment. So now you do an access review and you figure out that there are 12 users who have it. So now you can remove those 2 users who shouldn't have access to that particular assignment, or you can deny access for that role assignment to them. So that basically clears up and efficiently manages the memberships and access to certain applications, which in turn makes your Azure account secure enough. So now access reviews are mainly important because excessive access rights can lead to compromises. So not every user should have every single access. They should only have access to the things which they need. Even though, let's say a user just needs access for 2 hours, you can create a temporary assignment, which in turn they can log in, use it for those 2 hours, and that's it. They cannot access it again. So you can do these things. So now you have to proactively engage with the resource owners to ensure they regularly review who has access to their resources. So basically you'll have to regularly check if the resource owners to ensure if they regularly review who has access to those resources. And then if new employees are joining, so how do you ensure they have access so that they can be productive? So if a developer joins and they want to host their application, and if you don't provide them enough access to do that, then they won't be productive. So you'll also have to check that. And then as people move teams or leave the company, how do you make sure that their old access is removed? So basically, even when a person leaves, you'll have to, again, if an access review is present, then you'll get to know these are the users who don't need access because they have left the company. And then finally, excessive access right may also lead audit findings as they indicate a lack of control over access. Again, if you just let it go, then in that case, while finally doing an audit, then you'll find out there are a lot of mistakes and there are a lot of excessive access rights provided to certain users. So now, when should you use access reviews? First one, business critical data access. So let's say there is data which is really important to your company. So it might be required for people outside of IT to log out regularly and give the reason before they need to access the data which they need to access. Because sometimes the business critical data, if it's lost, then your business might be at a loss. So these things should be avoided. And apart from the IT team, everybody should log out once they basically check out what they need from it. And then when automation is not possible, if some users are not in Azure AD, then you can create a review on the group to ensure the users who need access still get it. So that is when sometimes automation will not be possible and some users might not be present in Azure Active Directory. In that case, you will have to do a manual review. And then too many users in privileged roles. Privileged roles in the sense, roles like global administrators or global traders or security administrators. So if there are too many users in privileged roles, you will have to do an access review and check who are the guests or who are the users who do not need it and remove it immediately. So these are some of the times where you will have to basically remove or use access reviews. So now I'm going to show you the hands-on for access reviews, how you can create it and also how you can review when you're given an access review. So let's start off with it. Okay. So first, to start off with it, you'll basically have to, you can just search for access reviews and you will get identity governance. So you can just click on identity governance or you can just search for identity governance. And once it's loaded, it looks something like this. Okay, so over here you can see there is an option to create an access review. So you can just click on this or you can go to access reviews over here. So let's start off by creating an access review. By clicking over here, you see two options. One is team plus groups, one is applications. If you have registered an application in Azure Active Directory, in that case, you can basically create an access review for the applications access. If not, you can do it for teams and groups. So right now, because I don't have any teams and groups over here. So you can see it will show all the users and teams and groups over here. So let me create users quickly so that we can start off with it. So I think you already know how to create users and how to create groups. So I'm just going to skip the part of creating and right now let's go back over there. Okay guys, so we are back here. So right now I've created the users and I've created two groups. So what we're going to do is we are going to assign a particular group the access review. So we are going to create an access review on a group which has 3 users. So I'm selecting the group. So you can see there are 2 groups and I'm going to select demo group 1 and select it. So in demo group 1 there are 3 users, user 1, user 2 and user 3. So we are going to review the access of these 3 users which are given over there. So here in scope I'm going to select all users. If you want to just review the guest users who have temporary access, in that case you can do that, but if not, you can just go ahead with all users. And next, reviews. So here you can add the reviewers. So you can basically select a particular person to do this. So selected users or groups. So once you select it, you basically select yourself. So you can see there are other users. So I'm going to select myself so that I am going to be the reviewer. And so we've done that. Now coming down. So you can basically select the occurrence or recurrence of review. So if it's one time, then in that case it's a single occurrence. If not, if you want a recurrence of this review, that is you want to do it weekly once or monthly once or quarterly once, so in that case you will have to provide it accordingly. So you can just give it over here. So I'm going to just provide it one time and I'm going to give it 5 days, and you can provide the start date. So if it starts today, that basically means 5 days later the access review would be closed off. Within that, the person who's assigned the access review should complete their review. So that's the case here. So now next is settings. So over here you don't need to basically check anything, or you don't need to change anything, but let me just give you the explanation for all this. So auto apply results to resource, in the sense, in the access review, if you are basically approving or denying, in that case it will automatically be approved instead of not that. There will be certain actions or there will be certain recommendations given, so that will be automatically approved on the user without any interference from the reviewer. So if it's disabled, then the reviewer is the person who decides what it is. Now over here, if there is no sign in within 30 days for any of the users, even that will be shown. And justification required, in the sense, so when you are approving or denying a certain user's access, in that case you'll have to provide a justification on why you're denying their access or why you're approving their access, and that would be mandatory. And if you do not want it to be mandatory, you can basically disable it. Then email notification would be sent to the reviewers so that they can start off the access review. And then reminders, so over here you can also provide emails for other users to whom you want to send it. So for example, I'm giving my own mail. So this email will be sent to the main reviewer and also to the person who basically you provided over here. So additional content for reviewer. So you can basically add what is the matter over here. For example, this review is to check whether the access is accurate for these users or something like that. You can just provide whatever you want over here. So once that is done, you can basically create the access review, and before that you will have to select the name, or give a name for the review. So I'm just going to provide it as access review 1, and if you want, you can provide a description. If not, you can just check it out once, review it, and then create the access review. So once you create the access review, if you have a mail ID, so that basically means the mail ID you've registered with Azure, you would have gotten an email over there where you can click and start the review. And we're going to look into Azure AD Privileged Identity Management, or you can just call it shortly as PIM. Okay, so PIM is a service in Azure AD that enables you to manage, control and monitor access to important resources in your organization. So now, organizations can give users just-in-time privileged access to Azure resources in Azure AD. So let's say you have a security team and you just want to provide a user access to certain resources and want to provide a certain assignment. For example, you want to make a user a security administrator for a certain task, but you just want to provide their access for 4 hours. You can do that using PIM, that is Privileged Identity Management. You can provide them access to that. So now, what does Azure AD PIM do? First of all, it provides just-in-time privileged access to Azure AD and Azure resources. It basically assigns time-bound access to resources using start and end dates. That is, when you provide access to a user, you can provide the start and end dates with the time, so that even though the user is not basically deleting or deactivating their role, it will automatically be deactivated after the time lapses. After that, require approval to activate privileged roles. So again, sometimes you need approval from the administrator, or you can just make them eligible for the assignment and they'll have to automatically activate it. Or you can basically enforce MFA for certain roles. Then use justification to understand why users activate for the role. For example, even though you've given access to assign, so basically you've given access to basically assign to a particular role to a user. So now that when that particular user is activating that role. Okay guys, if you're looking for an end-to-end Azure security course, Intellipaat provides one, and those details are available in the description box below. Now let's continue with this session. You will have to mandate that they'll have to put in a justification that they need the assignment or the access to it for this purpose. So they'll have to put in 1 or 2 lines explaining what they need this assignment or this particular role for. And then get notifications when the roles are activated. You can set up those notifications. Conduct access reviews again. This is what we saw in the last session. And then finally, downloading the audit history for checking who have what access and when they're logged in, when they've logged out, how much time they've been in that particular assignment. Okay, so this is basically Azure PIM. It's pretty simple. So we'll be doing hands-on where I'll be clearly explaining to you what AD PIM is and basically looking into assignments, the roles, how to assign it to user, and also how as a user to activate it and deactivate it. Hands-on for Azure Active Directory Privileged Identity Management. So now let me open the console. So this is the Privileged Identity Management console. Over here you can see there is manage, there is active, just in time, discover and monitor. So these are the features provided by Privileged Identity Management, and we already looked into that. So now looking at my roles, it's basically the role as a user you are having right now. So you can see right now I don't have any eligible assignments. Let's look into the active assignment. So as the default user, I have the global administrator role, and I cannot deactivate this option because I'm the main or the administrator. So I will not be able to delete this. Now going back, you can check out all the available roles provided over here. So now let's go to assign eligibility. So now over here you can see all the available roles which you can assign to a certain user. And over here you can see application administrator, application developer, billing administrator, directory writers. So you have so many different roles provided over here. So to start assigning these roles to certain users, you'll basically have to log in. You'll basically have to click on add assignment. So now what I'm going to do is I want to also log in. Let me open portal over here. Let me open users. So I want to log in into the user one's account. Yeah, so I'll just copy the principal name. That's basically the login, or you can just copy it from here and then sign in with a different account. Password. So once we provided, this is the first time I'm logging in. So once I give the password, it will ask me to change the current password. So I'm going to do that. And it's done. So now we'll be logging in to this particular user. So this is basically to enable multi-factor authentication for those users. So we can basically disable it. But right now you can see it is showing Microsoft has enabled security defaults to keep your account secure. So we can basically remove that as well. So to do that, we'll have to go to properties of Active Directory and do it. Let me go to Active Directory, go to properties, come down over here, content team can manage all, okay. And this is fine. So now security defaults. So security defaults is enabled, right? So I'm going to disable it and other or just something like that and save this. Okay, so I've removed security defaults policy. So now let's try to sign in into the account again.
Okay, so I think it's not updated yet. So right, let's check it once again. Now I'm going to log in into portal with the user account. Okay, so right now I'm logged in as the user. So over here you can see it's showing like this. So right now let me go to the building console, and over here you can see this a particular user is not able to see anything over here. Okay, so right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign this user the privilege to basically become the billing administrator. So to do that, we'll go to Azure AD roles, assign eligibility, and then click on add assignments. Once you do that, then you select the role. So I'm going to give the role as the billing administrator. So once I give that, and then what you'll have to do is you'll have to basically select the members. So I'm going to select user 1. So this is the user which I want to give billing permissions to, that is billing assignment. So now select it, and then next, and here you can basically make it permanently eligible, or you can just give them a certain period of time. Over here it's 1 year of time, so they can basically activate this particular assignment by like within this 1 year whenever they want, or you can basically provide permanently eligible, that is whenever they want they can make it eligible. Okay, so or if you want to directly assign them, you can provide active. That basically means once you assign this, it will automatically be assigned to them. They don't have to basically activate it themselves, or you can just make it eligible, and that's it. They'll be seeing it and they'll be taking it. So now let's assign this. Okay, so let it assign. So one more thing I wanted to show is, let's say I open one assignment. I open one particular role assignment. So over here you can see there are certain role settings provided here, and so did you get assigned? Yes. So the role is successfully assigned. I just wanted to show it over here. So over here you can see the activation maximum duration is 8 hours for this particular application administrator role. So now when you assign a particular role to a certain user, what you can do is you can basically decrease or increase the activation maximum duration. For example, if the user activates it, the activation would be, or the role would be available for a total of 8 hours. If you want the user to have it for 24 hours, you can extend it. If you want to reduce it to 3 or 4 hours, then you can do that as well. If you want to assign them multi-factor authentication only, then you can click on Azure MFA. If not, you can just give it as none. And also, while they try to basically become an application administrator, should they provide justification? If yes, select this. If not, disapprove this, and require approval to activate. That basically means once they give activate and they're basically clicking on activate, the main person, that is the main administrator, would get a mail or would get a message to activate that particular role for that user, so that you would know when they are basically activating it. If not, you can just leave it at that. And if you basically, right now we are editing the settings to one particular role, and you can change it to any role you want, and then once you change it, you can assign it to any user you want. Okay, so this is one more thing which I wanted to tell in identity privilege identity management. Now going back, now so right now this user has been assigned this particular role assignment. So right now let me open privileged identity management, go to my roles. So now you can see this particular person, this particular user has a billing administrator role eligible for them. So now this particular person can activate this role. So let's activate it. So now once I clicked on activate, you can see it is showing for the activation start time and the roles. So it's still validating the request. Once it's validated, we'll be able to change things over here and provide the reason why do we want to activate, and then click on activate, and that would be the end of it. Okay, so right now they're asking for additional verification. Let me click on this. That basically means I think they'll tell us to log in once again. Okay guys, so over here you can see I validated the additional request. That is, they asked I should set up either multi-factor authentication or I should set up using your mobile phone number. So if you are creating a user, you can just give your mobile phone number and then just apply so that you'll get an SMS whenever you try to log in. So they basically want to make sure there is multi-factor authentication enabled before you start off with giving yourself an administrator role. So that's exactly what I did, and you will also get that, and you also do that, and once you do that, you will get this option. So now you can use the custom activation start time that is provided over here. So you can basically select a date and a time in which you want it to be activated, or you can just activate it right now. So you can basically select the hours you want it to be active, and then later you can activate it for the rest of the hours. So let's say I want it for 8 hours. Then you'll have to provide a reason why exactly do you need this. I want to do some audits or something like that. So you provide a reason over here, and once you click on activate, the role assignment provided to you will be activated in 3 stages. So they process your request and activate your role, then they validate the activation, and once that is done, it is successfully activated, and that's it. And the page will automatically refresh, and once it is refreshed, the assignment will be assigned to the user, and now it won't be ineligible assignments, it will be available in active assignments. So now once it's active, you can deactivate it whenever you want. So now let's open cost and billing management. So now you've been assigned as the billing administrator, and once there are like for example, once you take a subscription yourself, you'll be able to check out everything. You'll be able to make all kinds of changes in this particular directory. Okay, so right now, as this is an sponsorship subscription, you won't be able to do that because it gets reduced. The amount which is basically given as the bill will be reduced from the subscription amount, so that you don't have to basically pay extra for it. So right now it won't show anything over here. So this is how you basically assign a role to a particular user, and you can do it to any number of users. You can edit the roles, so you can edit what can the roles do. You can edit the time like you give for the users to assign it, and time you give for the users to activate it, and then you can the users can basically deactivate it if they no longer need the role. And again, to check if all the users have or have not have access to certain things, you can do an access review on these users as well to check if the assignments are active or not, or deactivated. So all that can be checked. And over here I'm deactivating the assignment, and once it's deactivated, if you want, you can check it over here. So let's see. So the role has been deactivated successfully, and again, and if you want, you can activate it again. So this is basically privileged identity management, and you can change these things. For example, you can go ahead and you can check out the other roles. You can change the conditions or change the settings of the assignments, and then you can assign it to users, so it won't basically affect anything you do over here. You can change what does an role do. You can change the timing of activation for that role. For example, for groups administrators, you can change the activation duration from 8 hours to 4 hours, and that's in the global administrators hands. Okay, so we've seen this. Let's go back over here.
We are going to look into Azure AD Connect. So let's start off with it. So AD Connect is the Microsoft tool designed to meet and accomplish your hybrid identity goals. So now hybrid in the sense you're on premises as well as the Azure cloud. So now there are certain things which you'll have to know in AD Connect, which are basically features provided by AD Connect. So there are some things like health monitoring, there is password hash synchronization, pass-through authentication, federation integration, and synchronization. Okay, so now looking at this image, you can see this is your on-premises, and in on-premises you have Active Directory, and then again you have the Azure cloud where you have all your applications, all your SaaS applications, Office 365, and also Azure Active Directory. So now, and the user basically is signing into the cloud. So now the user should be able to access the on-premises Active Directory as well as the cloud one. And to do that, you need AD Connect, which basically connects the Active Directory with the on-premises. Okay, so it's an application which you can download and install and set up in your on-premises systems, which basically gives the user access to access the on-premises system directly from logging into Azure Active Directory. So now let's just look at why do we need or why do we use Azure AD Connect. First of all, users can use single identity to access cloud services like Microsoft 365. They can also basically use other applications which are provided over here. You can see SAP or Slack or their Gmail account, or Dropbox or whatever application it is. They can use their single identity to access all of this, and then single tool to provide an easy deployment experience for synchronization and sign in. The single tool is more than enough to log in into cloud and as well as your on-premise setup, and nothing else is required. And Azure AD Connect replaces old identity integration tools like Azure AD Sync or dir Sync. So instead of Directory Sync or Azure AD Sync, you can go ahead with Azure AD Connect, which integrates your on-premises setup with your cloud. So it's basically pretty simple. You just have to put in your domain, then configure it and download the Azure AD Connect application in your on-premises setup and set it up, and that's it. You will have connection to it. So you can basically log in to the cloud and access your on-premises systems as well. So now there is also one more tool which is really important in AD Connect, which is Azure AD Connect Health. So now Azure AD Connect Health provides robust monitoring of your on-premises identity infrastructure. It enables you to maintain a reliable connection to Microsoft 365 and Microsoft Online Services. So basically, Azure AD Connect Health is automatically provided or already provided by Azure when you use Azure AD Connect, and AD Connect Health helps monitor and gain insights into your on-premises Active Directory or on-premises identity infrastructure, even when you're not logged in and even when you're not using it. And again, it is as simple as installing an agent. So you basically install the agent in your on-premises systems which you need this health monitoring for, and that's it. It automatically sends you everything. So it will be available in Azure AD Connect Health. So you can open the portal and you can go ahead and check it over there, and every information will be available over there. And then so Azure AD Connect, it's pretty simple to do it. So first of all, you need the sync component and the sync service. So the first thing is you should install the sync component in the on-premises systems, and that's it. So once you do that, the Connect Sync service automatically runs itself and syncs the Active Directory and the Active Directory on the on-premises setup. So there are two more concepts which you'll have to know. One is password hash synchronization, and one more is pass-through authentication. So now looking at password hash synchronization. So Azure AD Connect synchronizes the hash of the user's password from an on-premises Active Directory instance to a cloud-based Azure AD instance. So password hash synchronization helps by reducing the number of passwords your users need to maintain just one, and can increase productivity and reduce load on help desk. So now if you use password hash synchronization, you can directly log in into the on-premises Active Directory or the Active Directory, the Azure Active Directory, using just a single password. And to do that, you will have to set up password hash synchronization, and that's more than enough. It will be, so basically you can start off doing that, and it will become much simpler for the users and to be more productive, because they just need one password and they can just use single sign-on and automatically log into any of the Active Directories they want. And then there is pass-through authentication. So pass-through authentication allows users to sign into both on-premises and cloud-based applications using the same passwords. So now when users sign in using Azure AD, so this feature validates users' passwords directly against your on-premises Active Directory. And finally, by combining pass-through authentication with a feature called seamless single sign-on, you can basically log in into your corporate network without even typing in the passwords. So your users are accessing applications on their corporate machines inside your corporate network. So that basically means there is no security breach. Everything is happening within your network. In that case, the users don't even have to provide the password, because pass-through authentication has been connected with seamless single sign-on. So this is how it works. Pass-through authentication. You have your user who signs into the Azure Active Directory. So once the user signs in, they can basically access all the SaaS applications, or for example Office 365, and then using pass-through authentication and the authentication agent which is running on the Windows server, your on-premises infrastructure. So on the on-premises infrastructure, you also have your Active Directory. So now using this agent and through pass-through authentication, you basically log into the Active Directory, and then identity synchronization using Azure AD Connect. So doing that, you can basically connect it with Azure Active Directory, and now with just signing into your Active Directory, it will automatically sign you to the Windows Server Active Directory as well. So password validation requests are sent to Windows Server Active Directory via pass-through authentication, and it will be accepted, and that's it. Just one sign in and you will be good to go with Azure Active Directory as well as the Windows Server's Active Directory. So this is basically AD Connect, which makes it simpler to, which makes the connection between the Windows Active Directory in the servers, on-premises servers, and the Azure Active Directory. So the connection between them much simpler and easier for you. So now let's say you have your Azure account and you want to transfer your billing ownership. So to do that, you open your cost management and billing dashboard, and over there you can open your subscription, and in the subscription you will get an option to transfer your billing ownership. So by clicking on that, you can put in the mail ID of the person or of the account to whom you want to transfer the billing ownership, and once you do that, they'll get a mail in which they'll have to accept the transfer, and once they accept the transfer, the ownership of this particular Azure subscription will be successfully transferred to that particular account which you have mentioned. So now the new owner will be able to change the payment method. They can basically view the charges. They can even cancel the subscription because the subscription is not in your hand anymore. So this is basically Azure ownership transfer, and yeah, so it's pretty simple. And right now I'll just open the console and show you how to do it.
I'm going to show you transfer of ownership. There is transfer of billing ownership. I'm not actually going to transfer the billing ownership, but I'm just going to show you how you can do that. So over here, go to cost and billing management, and then you will get a billing account, a billing scope. So right now I don't have a subscription created, it's just a sponsorship account. So over here you can go to Azure subscriptions and you can check what is the subscription, and this is the subscription which is active in my account right now. So over here you get an option to transfer the billing ownership. So over here you can see, you can click on this and you'll get the option to transfer it. But as this type of subscription cannot be transferred because it's a sponsorship subscription. If it is a normal pay-as-you-go subscription, once you click on this, you will get an option to put in the email ID of the person you want to transfer it to, and once you put that in, it will ask you to basically click on send a request. So a request would be sent to the user whose email ID you have provided, and once you do that, basically they can accept it and the billing ownership would be transferred. It's pretty simple, but if you want to transfer the billing ownership, you can do it like this.
Okay guys, if you're looking for an end-to-end Azure security course, Intellipaat provides one, and those details are available in the description box below. Okay guys, that's it for this particular session. So I hope this session was helpful and informative for you. If you have any queries, leave a comment down below and we'll love to help you out. Thank you.